I woke up with a start at 4 o'clock one morning and realized that I was very, very pregnant. Since I had conceived 6 months earlier, one might have thought that the news would have sunk in before then, and in many ways it had. But it was on that early morning in May that I first realized how severely pregnant I was. What tipped me off was that lying on my side and needing to turn over, I found myself unable to move. My first thought was that I had had a stroke. Nowadays, I go around being aware that I am pregnant with the same constancy and lack of surprise with which I go around being aware that I have teeth. But a few times a day, the information actually causes me to gasp. How on earth did I come to be in this condition? Well, I have a few suspicions. I mean, I am beginning to put two and two together. See, there was this guy. But the guy is no longer around, and my stomach is noticeably bigger every few days. I could have had an abortion. The pressure to do so was extraordinary. And if need be, I would take to the streets armed to defend the right of any woman for any reason to terminate a pregnancy. But I was totally unable to do so this time, psychologically, psychically, emotionally. Just totally. So I am going to have a baby pretty soon, and this has raised some mind-boggling issues. For instance, it occurs to me over and over that I am much too self-centered, cynical, eccentric, and edgy to raise a baby, especially alone. The baby's father was dramatically less excited than I was to find out I was pregnant, so much so that I have not seen or heard from him in months and don't expect to ever again. At 35 years old, I may be too old and too tired to be having my first child. And I really did think for several seconds that I might have had a stroke. It is not second nature for me to believe that everything is more or less okay. Clearly, my nerves are shot. For example, the other day, one of the innumerable deer that come down here from the mountain to eat in the garden and drink from the stream remained where it was as I got closer and closer. It was standing between me and my front door. I thought, boy, they're getting brazen, and I walked closer and closer to it, finally to within 4 or 5 feet, when suddenly it tensed. My first thought was that it was about to lunge at me, snarling. Of course it turned instead and bolted through the woods, but I was left with the increasingly familiar sense that I am losing my grasp on reality. One moment, I'm walking along the salt marsh, listening to sacred choral music on headphones, convinced that the music is being piped in through my ears, into my head, down my throat, and into my torso, where the baby will be able to hear it. And the next moment, I'm walking along coaching the baby on how best to grow various body parts. What are you, some kind of nut? I ask myself. And I know the answer is yes, some kind of nut. And maybe one who is not well enough to be a mother. But this is not the worst fear. Even the 3 weeks of waiting for the results of the amniocentesis weren't the most fearful part, nor was the amnio itself. It was, in fact, one of the sweetest experiences of my life. My friend Manning drove me into San Francisco and stayed with me through the procedure, and, well, talk about intimate. It made sex look like a game of Twister. I lay there on the little table at the hospital with my stomach sticking out, Manning near my head holding my hands, a nurse by my feet patting me from time to time, one doctor running the ultrasound device around and around the surface of my tummy, the other doctor taking notes until it was his turn with the needles. The ultrasound doctor was showing me the first pictures of my baby, who was at that point a 4-month-old fetus. He was saying, there's the head now, there's the leg, there's its bottom. And I was watching it all on the screen, nodding, even though it was all just underwater photography, all quite ethereal and murky. Manning said it was like watching those first men on the moon. I pretended to be able to distinguish each section of the baby because I didn't want the doctor to think I was a lousy mother who was already judging the kid for not being photogenically distinct enough. He pointed out the vertebrae, a sweet curved strand of pearls, and then the heart, beating as visibly as a pulsar, and that was when I started to cry. Then the other doctor took one of his needles and put it right through my stomach, near my belly button, in a circle that the ultrasound doctor had described with the end of a straw. I felt a pinch, and then mild cramping, and that was all, as the doctor began to withdraw some amniotic fluid. Now, you probably think, like I thought, that this fluid is some vaguely holy salt water flown in from the coast for the occasion, but it is mostly baby pee, light green in color. What they do with it then is to send it to the lab, where they culture it, growing enough cells from the tissue the baby has sloughed off into the amniotic fluid to determine if there are chromosomal abnormalities and whether it is a boy or a girl, if you care to know.